Hello, students. It's me coming at you with your grade 12 university class of the day for May 27th, where we're going to get straight into Gravel. So, we talked a little bit about it yesterday, but I want to get through some of the details of the story right now, right, and sort of break them down into three parts, specifically three different characters. So, first of all, I want to talk about the narrator, that person who's narrating the story, whose gender is uncertain, right? The narrator of the story, Karo's little brother or sister, whatever she or he is supposed to be. So, the thing to know about this story is that this person is a little kid, right? Who is too young to have very clear memories, right? So this sort of comes across in several different places in the story, right? You might notice, say, for instance, on page 8 over here, when Karo tells the narrator, "Go tell mom that I'm drowning." She says things like, "I may have said that, or I may have just stood there not obeying and trying to work up another argument," right? The word may means it might have been like this, or it might have been like that, right? And the reason for that is, well, think back to your own life, right? When you did things at 6 years old, right? Can you remember them that clearly? Like, do you know exactly what you were thinking and exactly what you were doing? Probably not, right? And the same thing is happening here, where, it's just happened when the child was very young, so therefore they can't remember very well. All right? So that is one thing to keep in mind when you're reading this story. This, by the way, is what we call being an unreliable narrator, right? An unreliable narrator is when the person telling the story is not trustworthy, right? So, a good example would probably be a girl's story for this, right? In that, the narrator is drunk and he's complaining and everything like that. So, that guy's an unreliable narrator, right? Because he's, a bit of an idiot, right? This person, it's not that, the narrator's a bad person, but they're unreliable because their um, memories of what happened are, well, not very concrete, right? So there's a lot of uncertainty about what actually happened to Karo because of that, right? We know that she drowned in the water and everything like that, but, well, why did it happen? Well, we'll see here on what page is this? Page 9 at the top, right? The narrator says, "I went to see a professional person about this once, and she convinced me, for a time, she convinced me that I must have tried the door of the trailer and found it locked. Locked because my mother and Neil were having sex and had locked it against interruptions. If I'd banged on the door, they would have been angry. The counselor was satisfied to bring me to this conclusion, and I was satisfied too for a while. But I no longer think that was true. I don't think they would have locked the door because I know once they didn't, and Carl walked in and they laughed at the look on her face." So, that's what the psychiatrist told her, right? Is that, she wasn't able to open the door because of the parents having sex, but, well, that's even the narrator doesn't believe that, right? She doesn't think that that actually happened, right? So that sort of puts a question mark on everything that happens, right? You sort of have to. It makes this story a little bit tricky because essentially, everything that you're being told, it's not firm. Sorry. It's not on firm ground because, well, it's this unreliable narrator, and the facts are not as clear as you might prefer them to be, right? And that's something that you should keep in mind both when you answer the short answer question and when we move on to essays, is that this is a young person, or she was young, and the memories aren't very sharp. But let's try to figure out what we can figure out with the information that we have, right, in terms of Karo's death. So again, we know that the narrator had a job to do from Karo. Go tell our parents that Mia and Karo are drowning, right? So that's outlined on page 8, right? I was to go back to the trailer and tell Neil and our mother something, that the dog had fallen into the water. The dog had fallen into the water, and Karo was afraid she'd be drowned. Blitzy, drowned. Blitzy wasn't in the water. She could be, and Karo could jump in to save her. So, that's what she was supposed to do, but of course, this is right here. Yeah, here it is. Karo instructed me to do as I was told. Why? I may have said that, or I may have stood there not obeying and trying to work up another argument. Right? So, and let me read the next bit. In my mind, I could see her picking up Blitzy and tossing her, though Blitzy was trying to hang on to her coat, then backing up, Karo backing up to take a run at the water, running, jumping, all of a sudden hurling herself at the water, but I can't recall the sound of the splashes as they, one after the other, hit the water, not a little splash or a big one. Perhaps I had turned toward the trailer by then. I must have done so. So you'll notice she says perhaps, and I must have, right? So that shows she doesn't remember very well. But nevertheless, when I dream of this, I am always running, and when my dreams, I'm running not toward the trailer, but back toward the gravel pit. I can see Blitzy floundering around, and Karo swinging toward her, swinging strongly on the way to rescue her. I see her little brown checked coat and her plaid scarf and her proud, successful face and reddish hair darkened at the end of its curls by the water. All I have to do is watch and be happy, nothing required of me after all. What I really did was make my way up the little incline toward the trailer, and when I got there, I sat down, just as if there had been a porch or a bench, though in fact the trailer had neither of these things. I sat down and waited for the next thing to happen. So, essentially, she's supposed to go call for help from Neil, right? That's sort of what Carol wanted, but the narrator didn't do it. Now, how come? Well, there's a couple of different things. One is she's small, she's a little kid. It's very possible that she just was either being kind of dumb, or she didn't really understand the instructions, right? She didn't understand what Karo was doing, and so she didn't do what she was supposed to do, right? So that is the first set of possibilities, right? Uh, it would probably be too much, right? If any of you answer, the question, the short answer question, who's responsible for Karo's death, and you say that it was the narrator, that would probably be a little much, because I don't think there's any evidence that suggests that she wanted to kill her sister, right? I don't see anything in there that would suggest that. But, nevertheless, you could definitely bring up the other things, right? For instance, what the psychiatrist said, right? Maybe the parents were busy, or well, not parents, the mother and Neil were busy with each other and ignored her, right? We don't really know. All we know is that she did not fulfill her role in Karo's little drama here, right? She did not call for help the way Karo wanted her to. Karo, by the way, even if she could swim, jumped into the water with her jacket and her boots and everything like that. So it seems likely that she was weighed down by all of those clothes. And, holding a dog on top of that, of course she's going to sink, right? So, yeah, that's what happened to Karo. But in terms of why the narrator didn't do their job, well, it's hard to really say, right? And this is perhaps something we could discuss tomorrow when we have our Google meeting, right? What's going on with the narrator here? We can't really say, but we do know that they did not fulfill their role, right? And we'll talk more about that tomorrow. Then there's the mother, right? Who is sort of the other side of the story. And I can tell you, I've taught this story before in previous classes when we still had classes, and I always know that a lot of students really hate the mother, right? They don't think that she was a good mother because she, wasn't taking care of her kids and everything. And, there's a lot to criticize her about, right? But let's be fair to her, right? So first of all, at first when she moves out to the trailer, she is acting a little crazy, right? She, for instance, walks around naked in her house. Where's the naked part? It says on the bottom of the second page and the beginning of the third that after she left her house and everything behind, she meant to go around naked at least some of the time in the country as long as the weather stayed warm. That didn't work out because when she tried it, Caro went and hid in her cot, and even Neil said he wasn't crazy about the idea. Right? So she is doing all sorts of wacky stuff when she is living with Neil, right? And she's sort of going a little bit, I guess you could say, crazy out there, right? Walking around naked and everything like that. Also, constantly having sex with Neil, I should add. That's, one thing that Caro or the narrator mentions also on the top of page 4, right? My mother's good times with Neil went on into the night. If I woke up and had to go to the bathroom, I'd call for her. She would come happily, but not in any hurry, with some piece of cloth or a scarf wrapped around her, and also a smell that I associated with candlelight and music and love, right? So, very, I guess you could say controversial mother that we have here. But before you come down too hard, right? And I know that some of you, when you answer the question about who's responsible for Carol's death, you're going to say mother, absolutely. But before you come down too hard, there are signs that she starts to change as life in the trailer goes on, right? For instance, there's the whole thing with the wolf, right? Let's see here. This is on page 5. Uh, this at the bottom, right? Then I noticed that Blitzy, who was always with us, just behind or ahead of us, wasn't there anymore. Another dog was on the opposite side of the road, a few feet from the mailbox. My mother phoned the theater as soon as we got home and let Blitzy in, who was waiting for us. Nobody answered. She phoned the school and asked someone to tell the bus driver to drive Cairo up to the door. It turned out that the driver couldn't do that because it had snowed since Neil last plowed the lane, but he did watch until she got to the house. There was no wolf to be seen by that time. Neil was of the opinion that there never had been one, and if there had been, he said it would have been no danger to us, weak as it was, probably from hibernation. Cairo said that wolves did not hibernate. We learned about them in school. My mother wanted Neil to get a gun. You think I'm gonna go get a gun and go shoot a goddamn poor mother wolf who has probably a bunch of babies back in the bush and is trying to protect them the way you're trying to protect yours? He said quietly. So we'll talk about Neil in a moment, but she is showing that she's not completely irresponsible there. The idea of a wolf being around her children does freak her out, and she's saying, let's go get a gun. Now, they don't actually get a gun, right? But she at least shows that she's concerned, right? So before you say that she's the devil, then, well, at least take that into account. Lastly, after Caro dies, she does change a little bit more, right? A lot more, even, because she then starts to work a bit more seriously. Let me find that part. So this is on the second, or page 10, right, where it says, my mother went back to her old duties at the theater. At first, she may have worked as she had before as a volunteer usher, but at the time I was in school, she had a real job with pay and year-round responsibilities. She was the business manager. The theater survived through various ups and downs and is still going now, right? So she does sort of turn over a new leaf after Caro dies and starts to manage the theater. So it's not like she's just walking around naked forever, right? She isn't like that for her entire life, right? But well, you guys can judge her as you wish, right? If you're not convinced and you still think it's the mother's fault, then that's okay, right? You're allowed to think that, right? There's certainly something you can present a good argument for. Then there's Neil, right? Neil is an interesting character. So first of all, he's a hippie, right? And this is set in the 1960s. Hippies are a peace movement that rose in opposition to the war in Vietnam for the United States, but it also was a cultural movement, right, with long hair, braids, and people being like, "Oh, peace, man," and all that stuff, right? So he's that kind of guy, right? And I hope you recognized him as that, right? So he is not really about working hard or anything like that, right? He's more interested in just relaxing and everything like that, right? So Neil is maybe not the most responsible person in the entire world. So, plus, it's worth mentioning, he's a Canadian hippie, right? The hippies in America were protesting against the Vietnam War and everything like that. Canada wasn't in the Vietnam War, right? So there's nothing. I mean, you could protest against America, but he was in no danger of being drafted and anything like that. He's in Canada. There's no Vietnam War in Canada, right? We were not part of that. Nevertheless, two things about him. So, first of all, on page 7, there's a small detail that I hope you guys picked up, right? This is just at the top. A Saturday, Kara watched The Friendly Giant with me and made comments that spoiled it. Neil was lying on the couch, which unfolded into his and my mother's bed. He was smoking his kind of cigarettes, which could not be smoked at work, so had to be made the most of on weekends. Caro sometimes bothered him, asking him to try one. Once he had let her, but told her not to tell our mother. Now, I want you to think about that wording here. His kinds of cigarettes that can't be smoked at work. Huh. What are those? His kind, huh? He's a hippie, remember? So, I give you a 90% chance that what the author is meaning there is that's marijuana, right? So he is smoking marijuana, and quite significantly, he did give some to Caro, right? So he gave marijuana to a small child, right? I think Caro's supposed to be about 13 or so, right? He gave marijuana to her, and well, that's the kind of person that he is, right? Where he's sampled them that way. So, that's one thing you definitely can mention about him. But in terms of the death, well, let's ask the question of what responsibility Neil has. Now, the narrator talks to this guy at the end of the story, right? And this is an important bit here, right? So, let's see here. This is on page 11. So he gets in touch with Neil, and let's see. What did he do for a living? He said that he tutored students in preparations for exams. Also, he helped them write their essays. Sometimes you might say he wrote those essays. Of course, he charged. It's no way to be a millionaire, I can tell you. He lived in a dump, or a semi-respectable dump. He liked it. He looked for clothes at the Sally Ann. That was okay, too. Suits my principles. So, he ends up, after Caro's death, he's a tutor, but sort of a sketchy tutor because he does the students' work for them, right? Don't hire anyone like Neil, by the way. No. That's not a good way to be successful. But he lives in a dump, right, or semi-respectable dump, and his clothes come from Sally Ann, which is Salvation Army, right? That's the charity store. And well, he's a bit of a wreck, but here's what he says about Karo. I was stoned, he said, and furthermore, I'm not a swimmer. Not many swimming pools around where I grew up. I'd have drowned too. Is that what you wanted to know? I said he was not really the person. He was not really the one that I was wondering about. Then he became the first person I'd asked, "What do you think Caro had in mind?" The counselor had said that we couldn't know. Likely she didn't know what she wanted. Attention. I don't think she meant to drown herself. Attention to how bad she was feeling. Ruthann had said to make your mother do what she wanted, make her smarten up and see that she had to go back to your father. Neil said, "It doesn't matter. Maybe she thought she could paddle better than she could. Maybe she didn't know how heavy winter clothes can get, or that there wasn't anybody in a position to help her." He said to me, "Don't waste your time. You're not thinking, what if you had hurried up and told, are you? Not trying to get in on the guilt." I said that I had considered what he was saying, but no. "The thing is to be happy," he said, "no matter what. Just try that. You can. It gets to be easier and easier. Nothing to do with circumstances. You wouldn't believe how good it is. Accept everything and then tragedy disappears. Or tragedy lightens anyway, and you're just there, going along easy in the world. Now goodbye." I see what he meant. It really is the right thing to do. But in my mind, Caro keeps running at the water and throwing herself as if in triumph, and I'm still caught, waiting for her to explain to me, waiting for the splash. Okay, so, Neil there. Right, first of all, he's saying that he was stoned while this was all happening with Caro, right? So that he was smoking marijuana and that's why he did what he did. That's his explanation, though, right? And, if you want to write about that in your answer, right, when you say the reason Caro died was because of this, you absolutely can, right? But here is where things might get a little complicated when you answer that particular question, right? Because what you should know is that Neil feels guilty about what happened himself, right? So he feels his own guilt for that, right? So he is beating himself up inside too, right? So it's not that he just is like, yeah, kid died, right? He feels guilty himself, right? And when he says, uh, you're not thinking of, oh, wait, where is it? Where's that trying to get in on the guilt line? Oh, yeah, there it is. Not trying to get in on the guilt. When he says that, right, he seems to be saying, no, no, no. Narrator, right? You, he, she, whoever it is, you shouldn't feel guilty. I'm the one who's guilty, right? It should be me who's got the guilt, not you, right? And, you could, in a way, consider that to be sort of protecting the narrator. I don't know. But we should focus on the question, which is, who is responsible for Caro's death? Now, when you guys answer this particular question, open it up, come on, there it is. Yeah, I do want you. I don't want an all of the above answer. Okay, I don't want you to say it's Neil's fault, it's the mother's fault, it's the father's fault, it's narrator's fault, and it's the dog's fault. Don't do that, right? Give me one person, focus on that person, and sort of make a judgment based on that. Okay, so that's what I'm really looking for with this particular question. Meow. Just a reminder, there is a Google meeting tomorrow at 2 o'clock, so there will be no video, but there will be a Google meeting at 2 o'clock, okay? Make sure you're there, meow. Yes, please make sure you come to the Google meeting tomorrow at 2 o'clock so that we can talk about this stuff. Also, a reminder that your questions are due at noon tomorrow, right? That's your final time to do the questions, is tomorrow at noon, right? So if you don't have them before then, it's going to be the 0. All right, so make sure tomorrow by noon you've gotten in all 4 of your short story questions, right? These ones here, right? For happy endings, King of the Raft, girl story, and gravel. All right, so most of you have done the first 3 already, so you just have to do the gravel one, so that's good. All right, guys, so I will see you all tomorrow during the Google meeting, and thanks so much for listening. Meow. Bye.